We will also be posting the recording, and we will do that on Innovate Bio, and I should have it posted by usually I get them posted by Monday afternoon. You can also visit Innovate Bio and look for presentations to see recordings from other ATE project talks and future ATE project talks. Next week, we're going to have some really great talks as well. We're going to have talks from PIs from two ATE projects in Maryland. One of them is here today, Savita Prabhakar, and Lori Kelman may be joining us as well. Savita is going to be talking about developing curricula to support cell and gene therapy, specifically in the area of flow cytometry. And Lori is going to be talking about a new credential in cell and gene therapy. So I hope you can join us. Be sure to register, and we'll look forward to seeing you. So right now, without too much ado here, I am really happy to be introducing Dr. Guy Hamilton, who is my boss, I guess, at Shoreline Community College for the few weeks a year when I teach, and John Carrese, who has been working in biotechnology education, I think, well, both Guy and John almost as long as I have, which has been a long time. And take it away, John. They're going to be talking about a new report on the labor needs for immunotherapy. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandy. Guy's going to share our slide deck and start us off.
Yep. Thanks, Sandy. Can everybody see the PowerPoint there? Good. Yep. And thanks, Sandy. I've never heard Sandy describe me as her boss. That's kind of funny. So John and I are gonna kind of share with you some work we've done in conjunction with our advisory committee, which I saw Bob is in this meeting and Carla is in this meeting, who have really helped out. So we're going to talk about this national labor market and skills gap analysis that is going to be part of our immunotherapy biohub. And I'll start with a little bit of kind of contextually, like what is our immunotherapy biohub, and then John and I are going to talk, and mostly John, because he's done such a great work. And then, as I said, we've had great input from our national advisory committee, so from all kind of parts of the country that have helped us develop this report. So I'll start a little bit and just kind of say, in immunotherapy biohub are part of the hubs, so that most of you here, I'm assuming, since you're part of this, you've seen the Innovate Bio site. Innovate Bio, as an NSF ATE Center for Biotechnology Education, has created these hubs, and the idea of these hubs were to kind of create resource centers that are somewhat decentralized, so they're kind of around the country, and they provide support from a national perspective for educators and industry partners to kind of work together and develop workforce training programs. Ours is the focus has been immunotherapy, and so kind of in interest of time, because John and I, we've got a lot to talk about. We want to highlight the report. I kind of was going to kind of kick over to the internet, but for sake of time, I think I want to highlight some of the differences of what we think about immunotherapy. One is, as we're going to talk about, immunotherapy is kind of a sector, maybe slightly different, and so there's a lot of information that's out there in say biomanufacturing, cell therapy, gene therapy, and there's a lot of overlap and a lot of kind of different terminology. So we're going to define a little bit about what we think of as immunotherapy and the growth in that sector. And what we think of in the goals of this hub will have this national perspective. So there are a lot of great sites that house skill standards, curriculum development for biomanufacturing, for cell-based therapies, for gene therapies. What's different here is we are taking a more national perspective. So there are, if you look at NBC2, which is in the kind of New England area, and you have BTEC, which is down in North Carolina, that really highlight those networks and curriculum development, the things that are kind of scalable or transferable to other parts of the country, but they're really promoting a lot of the work they're doing and the partnerships they have, and their programs per se. We want to have a national a resource center, and that's the point I want to emphasize. This is a national resource center that isn't promoting, say, programs at Shoreline and being in the Seattle area, although there'll be information about those, but having that national support network and being a site that is kind of the go-to for educators who are trying to stand up workforce training programs and be that partner with industry. So so this is the title of our report, and kind of as the name implies, I've put there, it's a comprehensive analysis of the labor market and skills gap and immunotherapy technicians on a national level. So forward. Sorry, I'm not, there we go. So I'll kind of define a little bit of the sector. And so, you know, as I mentioned just a bit ago, by the sector here is what we think of as immunotherapy is a subset of biomanufacturing, and these are the five kind of, if we look here, the five we've taken from John can remind me, is this a Techonomy report?
Exactly, yeah. Their latest Techonomy 2022, I think.
And so if you look at the kind of five categories of biomanufacturing as kind of defined by them, immunotherapies comes out of the drugs and pharmaceuticals part of it. And it's really a subset of that piece of it. So if you think about drugs and pharmaceuticals, not everything within that subset would be considered an immunotherapy. And so we really are thinking about immunotherapies as a, slip of the finger on my mouse that went backwards. You know, you have traditional biomanufacturing that are doing things that are immunotherapies, which would be monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, cytokines, and then the kind of more emerging and really rapidly expanding area, which is that cell-based therapies, which include CAR Ts, and but it doesn't include the piece of this part of biomanufacturing, which would be more therapeutic enzymes, those types of things that are not necessarily manipulating an immune system, right? So that's how we think of defining the sector. And as I mentioned, we got a lot of great input from our advisory committee to kind of help us communicate that and define that for the report. So I'll turn it over to John, because this is, he and I will ping pong back and forth, but I'll kind of let you drive a little bit. And John, just tell me when you want me to advance slides as we go through kind of some of the pieces of the report and talk about the methodology of how John did the research and the results that we got.
Great, thanks, Guy. I just want to note for everybody that this report is close to final. It's still in draft form. We're still making some final tweaks before publishing it. So I would say look for it soon. We'll be posting it with Sandy's help on the Innovate Bio website. So I just want to make that note. The national industry overview related to this sector as a whole, as a market, really is there's a whole section of the report on that, and this is just one kind of graphic from that section that shows the growth and economic impact of this sector. It's regenerative medicine, Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. It's got this graphic. It shows in 2021, close to 23 billion was raised in financing for regenerative medicine and advanced therapies that include cell and immunotherapies, up from about 20 billion. But you can see the growth from 2017 is huge. So we're talking about a market that's emerging but growing quickly. So next slide, Rob. Guy. National workforce overview. We have a whole section in the report that this slide is showing you current and projected employment growth in traditional biosciences and biomanufacturing. To a little over 2 million employees in 2021 in terms of the biomanufacturing sector, up 12% from 2018. You can see the number of businesses there, 127,000 business establishments, up 26% from 2018 as well. So the total impact on the U.S. economy of the bioscience, life sciences, industry is huge, 2.9 trillion in 2021, up from a 12% increase from 2018. And then we have, I don't think we have a separate slide on this, but we do have a detailed section on really kind of splitting out the cell and immunotherapy workforce overview. Basically, that's relying on the literature and reports that we were able to identify that detail what this emerging workforce need is for cell and immunotherapy, looking at current and projected employment growth, and also the workforce challenges that these organizations are facing as they try to find talent as they ramp up. So next slide. So let me pause here and just say a little bit about methodology. So the first part of the report really is based on a literature review, over 50 articles that we found that articles and reports we found that really look at what's happening in the cell and immunotherapy space. And the second part of the report really looks at secondary data. We mine job postings data using a tool called Burning Glass, which is an analytics software tool that allows you to mine national job postings, millions and millions of job postings for all industries, all sectors. We were able to then kind of filter it and query it. Our target we were looking for were, how many cell and immunotherapy technicians jobs are being posted by organizations nationally, and then we'll talk about the 10 key states that we have job postings data for. But what you're looking at on the screen here is kind of if you think of a funnel, you've got a large number of job postings, national job database postings from employers, and we're filtering it at each level here. We first filter it by the 12-month period that we're looking at here, December through November 2022, December of 21 through 2022. We looked at just education level postings that have a bachelor's degree or less. We then looked at 6 key middle scale biotech occupations that we've been tracking for a while, in California and nationally, that we know are kind of that technician level occupation, where we would tend to find the postings for the cell and immunotherapy tech. So you can see the 6 occupations there. I don't need to read those to you. Then the real refinement came to in step 4, looking using these 9 key words that then filtered those postings yet again to identify the cell and immunotherapy jobs and the companies that are posting them. And so you can see the 9 words there. We worked with our with kind of subject matter experts to identify what those keywords were. And then next slide, last step in the filtering process, we looked at the industry codes where we would, the industries where we would typically find, and this is again from Techonomy and Bio and Techonomy, what defines the bioscience, biomanufacturing, actually the biomanufacturing sector, where what industries would you typically find jobs that for technicians in cell and immunotherapy or in biomanufacturing. So that was the final filter. Then from that, we got a data set that we began to work with. And what we're going to show you next are the results of that process at a national level. And then we'll also show you in a maybe a almost final slide what it looks like, at least the raw numbers for the total number of postings in the 10 key states. But at the national level, we're going to show you 8 charts. First 2 are here. So when you mine these postings, you have a data set of about a little over 14,000 postings nationally, what we got over that 12-month period, that say, yeah, these are organizations posting jobs that likely are for your target, which are cell and immunotherapy technicians. And the report details more about this method, but essentially what we just described is how we got here. For education, you can see these organizations are still predominantly looking for a bachelor's degree. as the the education that they put in their posting. Associate in high school almost even. Actually, kind of interesting. High school is even higher than associate, but this is not surprising. We typically see organizations posting jobs with the bachelor's degree as the education requirement. Then we queried it, ran a report around experience that they're looking for, and they typically in postings almost all the time list some level of experience they're looking for this job that they're hiring for. This is the good news. We thought when you look at this, they are an emerging sector. These organizations they're looking for talent. So they are looking for people that have predominantly 0 to 2 years of experience. So not expecting people to have 9 years of experience because the market is so new. So it's kind of like unrealistic ask in the job postings to put that higher level years of experience, especially for a technician. So this is good news, I think, in the sense that you don't need to have a lot of experience from the indications of these job postings data, but they are still looking technically for a bachelor's degree based on the data. So next posting or next slide. Yeah, sorry. Was that the next one?
Oh.
Maybe you skip one. Okay. So next pair of slides, we then ran a report on, for those 14,000 postings, what are the top companies, or we're going to rename this as one of the tweaks we're going to make in the final version. What are the organizations with the most job postings? Because they're not all companies yet. We've got, you can see in here, University of California in the top 3. And then you go down a little further, you got University of Pennsylvania. And you have kind of a hospital medical center, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is a pioneering hospital or organization in cell, gene, and immunotherapy. So you're seeing some medical centers and academic institutions in this list, and that's because it's an emerging market. And there's a lot of research and development happening at the early stages in those kinds of organizations. But you do have companies here. Obviously, you can see them. These are the top 15 organizations based on the number of postings out of the 14,000 in rank order. So that's an interesting list. Not that surprising, I don't think, but it's helpful to just see how it shakes out. Then on job titles. A lot in the report about our method on how we did this. We started with a list of the top 25 job titles, most commonly posted by organizations. Then we went with our advisory committee, went through a curation process, because with this tool, with Burning Glass, any variation in the title, if that said Research Associate 1 or Research Associate 3, which is a typical kind of listing an employer would make, it would be listed separate from research associate. They don't combine and aggregate for you. So we went through that process with our advisory committee, and we went from 25 job titles most commonly listed, top in rank order, to 8 by doing this combination and curation process. So here they are. Research associate, lab technician, and research technician are the top 3 spots. Again, we think this has, in a way, our hypothesis is that this is because many of the listings right now are still with early stage companies or those academic institutions and medical centers that are still in early stages of development with therapeutics. And so they're looking for more of that type of job. You can see the last 2 slots, manufacturing associate and quality assurance specialist, show up. And that's where we are, again, our hypothesis is that's where these organizations or companies are now into commercialization and production. And that's when they need that kind of a technician. And some of this data, when you look at the state data in the report, becomes even clearer, because certain states are further along, more mature, have more companies that are in manufacturing production stage, and they have more postings for manufacturing associates. That manufacturing associate, quality assurance, quality control job title rises in the rankings. So really interesting. I think that's an interesting thing to look at in the report when we finally release it. Next slide. Skills was a really important part of this report that we looked at. We ran a report, they call it specialized skills, but again, went through a very detailed, a kind of a long and very helpful process with our advisory board in curating this list of 25 skills. And we ended up with putting into two categories or two buckets, the specialized skills, and it kind of split evenly, interestingly, the specialized skills most commonly posted by organizations, and then the background knowledge most commonly posted by companies. They list it all together. We separated it out to the best of our ability based on our advisory board's input. And then we also did a little combining. Cell culturing and good manufacturing practices were a combination of skills. So cell culturing includes mammalian cell culture, tissue culture, for example. GMP also is a combination of GMP and CGMP. So we did a little combining there, but that's the rank order for the specialized skills. Really interesting to look at that. And then in the interest of time, I'm not going to read them. You can see them, they're there. And then look at the background knowledge topics that come up at in the top in rank order once we separated them. Biology experiments, the microbiology is lower, molecular biology, and then so forth down. So you can begin to think about curriculum with these two slides side by side. Like, what would you want to teach in a cell and immunotherapy course? The specialized and technical skills, and then also the background knowledge you'd want to hit in a course. And again, this is kind of a starting point for that, but it's based on real job postings data from actual employers posting jobs over the last 12 months. Next slide, Guy. Okay, I think the last two slides maybe. Here we're looking at a separate report you can run off of that query of the 14,000 national job postings. We ran a query on, okay, what people call soft skills, sometimes workplace skills that were most commonly posted by organizations. And there they are: research, communication skills, detail-oriented, not, teamwork's in there, troubleshooting, not uncommon list. We didn't get too surprised by this. Very, very typical kind of list that most employers are looking for in any sector. But it's nice to see that, what they come out with based on, again, the data from the job postings. And then finally, the slide on the right side is looking at the annual number of postings over a 11-year period, actually. And this is really interesting because you can see that dramatic in those last 4 years, from 2018 to 2021, you've got that you're beginning to hit those double-digit increases. Those are, you convert it as percentages, Guy, right? Is that year over year, the percentage growth, I believe?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it was raw numbers in the original version we had, but anyway, so that's a year over year growth percentage, and you can see it slope up there at the end, those double-digit increases. And finally, that last from 2020 to 2021, approaching 20%, 17% there. So really interesting. Maybe last slide. We're getting short on time, I know. Okay, so this is you're going to have to dig into the 10 states in the report. But what we're showing you here in rank order, the top 10 states, based on running state queries or running queries for, where are the top postings by state. And here they are: California, Massachusetts, and Washington in the top 3 slots. And then this cluster of Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, Texas, kind of in the 500s. Jersey hits 500. So anyway, that 10,473 is about 70% of the total national postings of 14,000. So that's really interesting. Those 10 states have 70% of the total postings in the 12-month period.
And what you'll see in the report when it's published, it's like what John did is we did the national level and the analysis, which you kind of just saw, and then replicated that for every state that you see here, right? So
Right, exactly.
the
Yeah,
breakdown in each state of those positions, right?
right. Okay,
Sorry.
this is the last slide, right, Guy? I mean, the takeaway is pretty clear. High demand for technicians nationally and in the 10 states for these cell and immunotherapy technicians. The trend over the past decade is very strong and growing to double digits. Every indication from both the literature review and the job postings data is that this trend will continue for this sector in terms of workforce talent needs. Again, I mentioned this before, but we think our hypothesis is the type of organization as well as the type of technicians needed tends to mirror or reflect the maturity or stage of development of the industry in each state, meaning early stage, startup companies, or where there's research and development happening in a medical institution or medical center, academic institution. They're going to need more of those research associate, research technician, lab technician positions. As they progress into commercialization and production, we're seeing in the state data, we think more of a need for manufacturing associates, quality assurance, and quality control positions. So that's kind of an interesting finding. We would probably need to do more research to kind of really tease that out, but that's kind of what it's looking like at this stage, just mining the data and trying to do some analysis of it. So with that, I think we're done with our slides.
Thanks, John. I'll stop sharing. And then, as Sandy said, we'll be around at the end for questions.
Right. I see we've already got a few in chat, so you can be thinking about your answers while I'm giving my talk. That's quite a tour de force. I think a lot of people will be glad to see this. And just as a reminder, we will be posting it on Innovate Bio when it's ready for prime time. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now. And hopefully, all right, good. Can you all see the first slide, developing cures?
Looks great.
Okay, thank you. So we have a big project team. It's not just me. Co-PIs are Todd Smith and Maggie Bryans and Erin Kamajaya and Sheila Vemu. And then some of the other people on the project are Feather Ives and Alyssa Dillman and Kandaya Mann. And there are 6 people also in our audience today who played a really fundamental role in our hackathons. So it's great to see you, Dave Menshew and Keith Loritz and Uwe Hilgert and Valerie Carson, or Maggie, I already said Maggie, and Savita Prabhakar, who will be again talking next week about flow cytometry. So anyway, lots of people on the project. It's been a lot of fun. Our grant goals for this have been to develop modules to support research projects related to antibody engineering. And then we're also looking at hackathons, which has been a really, really interesting experience that we've learned a lot from. So first of all, why antibodies? Well, I think John didn't say a lot about antibodies, but when you talk about immunotherapy, antibodies are a big part of it. Even with the cell therapies, all those CAR T cells, of those chimeric antigen receptors, those have antibodies. I'm going to go over a little bit about what we see antibody engineering as, how we're using hackathons, some of the results, the projects, and I'm going to tell you all we are having our next hackathon August 7th through 10th, and we encourage all of you to join us. We will have the application form available soon, and you can also always kind of check in periodically at antibodyengineers.org, but we'll also put it on Innovate Bio and of course put it in the Innovate Bio newsletter. So, okay, so why antibodies? Well, there's 4 big reasons. One, of course, is that antibodies are one of the most common forms of biotechnology drugs. And I think that, so there's been over 156 antibody drugs approved so far. And I'm wondering, could anybody unmute and name a biotech drug besides insulin? Any volunteers?
Daratumumab.
Yeah, and you heard that end, right? The mab at the end. It's an antibody. Many of you may have heard of Keytruda, used to treat former President Jimmy Carter for prostate cancer. Herceptin, one of the most popular breast cancer drugs, and continues to be used and modified for treating breast cancer. So they can be very powerful drugs, but not just drugs. Antibodies are also really used a lot as diagnostics. I'm sure a lot of you have used the SARS-CoV-2 tests that people have been sending out. Those, the ones they send to your house, those are based on antibodies. A certain fraction of you have probably taken pregnancy tests, or at least heard about them, that you can buy. Those are antibody tests. And ELISAs, they put the I in ELISA for enzyme-linked immune assay. Immunosorbent assay. And of course, they're not even just used for drugs or diagnostics, they're used as reagents. Flow cytometry, there are companies that sell analytical kits with over 30 different antibodies that you can use to be used to classify your cells. Also, they're used in imaging and staining and Western blots and purification. And most importantly, jobs. I don't know what fraction of the jobs John mentioned are jobs that are involved biomanufacturing antibodies, but there are a lot of jobs that have something to do with antibodies. I did in our biotech careers site, we know there are over 363 people in the companies in the US in over almost 600 locations that list antibodies as some kind of core activity that the company is involved with. You can see people are doing a lot of different things: product manager, operations, clinical lab, interns, antibody discovery. And those companies that work on antibodies, if we kind of break them down, we can see a lot of them have something to do with immunology or COVID or therapeutics or cancer, a lot of different things. Okay, so what is antibody engineering? Well, believe it or not, those 156 antibody drugs, I think all of them have been engineered to some extent, which means that they've been modified, the sequences of those antibodies. What do we do when we engineer antibodies? Well, we engineer many of them to humanize them. That is, if you have an antibody from a mouse or a rabbit or a horse, your immune system is going to recognize that as foreign and mount an immune response to the antibody. So to use an antibody as a drug, people take those and they take the human residues and the mouse, horse, whatever specific residues, and they change them and replace them with human residues to humanize them so that your immune system is not going to recognize them as foreign. We also engineer antibodies to improve their stability, the ability to manufacture them and use them as drugs. People are increasingly using de novo design and machine learning and AI to improve the affinity and specificity of antibodies. So there's a lot of interesting things we do. The process can be complicated, but we don't have to use all of the process. In fact, part of the reason we're doing hackathons is so different teams can work on different aspects of the process or related aspects of the process. So if we had an animal, we might begin by getting cells that are secreting the antibodies, fusing them with the tumor cell to get a pure culture or pure set of antibodies. We look at the properties, so we can have projects around measuring properties, staining, viscosity, binding. If we could clone and sequence antibody genes, or better yet, these days we can purchase cloned antibody genes, which is even better. Or we can purchase the sequences and clone them into whatever kind of plasmid we like. We have a lot of computational work, homology modeling and profiling and binding site characterization and epitope prediction. We can mutagenize things. We can transfect, grow cells, make nanobodies, lots of fun stuff. So we're using the hackathons so that we can have a whole bunch of different teams working on a lot of aspects of the antibody engineering process. So what is a hackathon? Well, some people, they originally began at some of the software companies to get programmers together working on different projects that a company might need. But the use has been, and application has expanded a lot. So now a more general definition is an event where teams work together to create a project in a short amount of time. They might be 2 days, they might be 2 weeks. Ours are 4 days. Some examples where they've been used, definitely some programming examples, but they don't have to involve programming at all. A lot of business courses use entrepreneurship activities use hackathons. There are scientific projects. The NCBI has sponsored lots of hackathons involving annotation, database work, bioinformatics, and there's competitions around hackathons too. So we've had a lot of fun with the past 2 hackathons we've had. One of our student participants in the original one said it taught him it's possible to create a community out of complete strangers and have meaningful conversations about our reality and how science influences that conversation, which I thought was a great quote and something that we really want to keep that spirit going. So who's been involved in the hackathons? Well, in January last year, we had 56% were from community colleges. In August, we had more community college participants. And we had participants in both from universities, from industry, which has been about the same. And these are high school teachers in both of them. And down the approximate number of participants has been close to the same. So roughly 40 to 39 in January, 40 in August. But we also, in January last year, we had 65 high school students. We weren't expecting them, but it turned out to be really great. And one of their teachers is here, and we're hoping to see them more in the future. We do not turn anyone away in our hackathons. In fact, originally we thought it was just going to be faculty and maybe some industry people. But as it turns out, it's been about half faculty and half students. In fact, the number of students increased, number of college students, that is, increased from January to August. And we've really enjoyed having the students participate on the hackathon teams with the faculty, because sometimes the students are the ones who get the most done. I think the faculty have been appreciating that. Some of them may answer that question later on too. All right, so what have we been doing for our projects? The first couple of hackathons, we have had an affordable antibody engineering screening project. We kind of shifted from January to starting to work with nanobodies, which we'll continue doing more with nanobodies as well. We have had projects related to the immune epitope database. One of these actually had a publication in Cubes, which I've listed at the bottom, called NetShop. This summer, we're thinking to have a DEI twist, perhaps, because if you're making a vaccine, you have to think about, can you stimulate T cells? Can your antigen-presenting cells actually present the peptides from a protein antigen to a T cell properly? And so we're thinking about DEI and thinking about the different HLA types, antigen-presenting properties of people from different ethnic backgrounds or parts of the world. We've had projects related to SARS-CoV-2 and the ability to escape antibodies. We're thinking maybe expanding this to influenza this summer. We've had projects around breaking an antibody. We did a project with a game last summer, which some of you will that game is, we're going to be talking about more about that game a bit later. This summer, we're going to have a project around the new NIST CHO cell line and working with NIST monoclonal antibodies. The reason is that the cell line that Maggie used previously is no longer available from the American Type Culture Collection. So she's going to be shifting to NIST CHO, and she and Lori Kelman will be working on this project with developing curricula around these new standardized CHO cell lines. we've had projects around a molecular modeling program, IC&3D, which we have another publication out, and we've been collaborating with NCBI. Machine learning, now this summer, that's going to change to immune profiling, which we worked on with Shoreline, a collaborative ATE project called Start Immunobiotech. So now we're going to take the results of that project and build that out further in our hackathon. And then we are thinking about a project looking at, there's like 882 sequences of commercial antibodies, not all commercial, maybe they are all commercial, in the Theradab database, and you can find all the sequence liabilities. So we're going to think about how we could engineer those and correct some of those sequence liabilities. Okay, so a lot of fun projects. This summer, August 7th through 10th, it'll be about 8 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. As I said, registration information will be out soon, and everybody is welcome. Industry, students, faculty, we put you all on the teams together. And as I'm hoping some of the people who are here today will verify, it is a great time. Okay, so now let's go through questions. Okay, Keith Loritz, one of our hackathon people, has a question for you, John and Guy. He said there were 14,000 listings and only 749 research associate positions. So what happened to the rest? Oh, you're mute.
Yeah, great question, Keith. Thank you for that. This gets talked about in our report in the data limitations section. This is not, this burning glass analytics software tool is not a perfect tool. It's kind of the best available tool we had to do this secondary research. So the answer to that is that two things. One of the limitations of the tool is that any slight variation in the words the employer uses when they're writing the job title, in this example, results in a unique job title being generated. So we did some combining, but we were only able to have, the other major limitation here that kind of gets to your question is they only give you access to the first 500 postings in any report. And we don't have access to the whole data set of 14,000. And so we talk about this as a data limitation in the report. We're doing our best kind of with the available data provided to show you, kind of the top job titles after our curation process. But that is definitely a limitation that their reporting of job titles isn't the complete data set, so we weren't able to work with all of the job titles. You would find lower down in the list as you go down lower, there would probably be there would be an ability to continue to do that curation process, and you'd see higher numbers. What you're looking at in that chart is about 20% of the, in the top 8 job titles represents, when all those numbers of postings is combined, is a 20% of the total. So
scaling by 5 would have been a good scaling by 5 would have been a good conversion.
Yeah, we could still think about that. I mean, you're saying just multiply those numbers by 5. Yeah. I mean, that's, you'd have to really qualify that in the narrative, that you couldn't absolutely know that that conversion is going to be exact or would be the real numbers, but it's something we could certainly add in as a data note. Yeah, good point.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
There's another question for you and Guy too, and Louise is asking about the 10 key states. Do the job postings reflect cell and gene therapy biomanufacturing only, or do they include antibody manufacturing, or?
Well, yeah, hard to know exactly. I mean, we're getting, again, through that filtering process that we went through in their methodology, we're getting organizations that after the filtering have posted jobs that we think are at our target, right? Cell and immunotherapy technicians, based on all the filtering and the criteria we set. Again, it's not a precise science here. We don't exactly know what they're doing. We don't have that level of detail in the data to know if they're working with antibodies or not in that organization. So it's an unknown. Guy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think that it's an important point because it's how this differentiates from kind of some other types of tools that allow you to search postings, right? And it's really based on the posting or the title of the posting, where these are, as we showed in one of the slides, there are these terms that we're filtering for, and we're looking for those terms as they show up in the postings, right? So it's not, not to your question, we're not searching based on that piece, right?
I think in Seattle, what we'd want to know is, does that include CGen? Or is it just Bristol Myers Squibb? But anyway, yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really, it sounds like a really informative report. And I think this is really important for people to know about. This is great.
Yeah, Guy and I were talking about this yesterday, getting ready for the presentation. Whenever you do data labor market research, two things are pretty clear. As soon as you do it, it's out of date because things are, especially in an emerging market, changing very rapidly. And secondly, it raises new questions, research questions you want to answer, like the ones that you're all posing right now. So
I would just say too, and it was really great discussions we had in the advisory committee, around some of these things of why certain jobs weren't there, or job titles weren't there. And so understanding the methodology and an understanding of we're searching postings, not just based on titles, but based on these keywords was really important. And, an understanding that also things, were underrepresented because of, I don't know, sorry if I missed you say this, John, but like there are things that came up like these evergreen postings. So postings that you might hire 100 people off of one posting, right? That's something that causes a great deal of underrepresentation, because that was in our advisory committee, folks mentioned that that's what they do at their corporations, those types.
Right. No, I didn't specifically mention that in the presentation, but we have that in the report, and that came loud and clear, from our subject matter experts on the advisory board, that this is, if anything, a significant undercount of the number of jobs nationally that you would expect to see. There's many more probably than that 14,000.
Yeah, and then like talking about, like you're saying, that filter where you're cutting off, at that level, and you're not seeing postings below a certain amount, and where people post, if it could say, manufacturing associate, Philadelphia site or something like that. And so when the Philadelphia site gets put as a qualifier on there, then it drops out. It drops out. So we don't even see it, right? So I think that's another reason there's an underrepresentation of these categories, because you're seeing this number of jobs, but they're not falling into the top categories for those types of reasons.
Yeah, great discussion. Well, you could always lead a hackathon team this summer and do some data science and look into these problems more. We'd love to have you join us. Okay, I'm going to, before I answer more, I have some hackathon questions here too, but I did post a link in the chat to a survey that we'd really love for you to fill out. It's really helpful for us to know what your thoughts are and get your feedback on these talks, so we know what to do and we get an idea about what we should be doing. Okay, so one thing, I'm going to answer some hackathon questions, but below the survey too, I also posted a link to biotech careers that shows 429 cell and gene therapy companies around the world. And those are just cell and gene, well, mostly cell and gene therapy companies. So if you ever get curious about seeing where they are and seeing if there are any in your area and where they're located, it's a place you can do that. Okay, so some hackathon questions. Okay, Ishvak, is the hackathon for students or faculty both? Both, and industry. Louise, are there incentives for students to participate in hackathons? Well, yeah, I mean, we don't pay anybody, but the incentives are that they develop skills, those soft skills, right? Those employability skills, such as leadership and communication and working with teams and learning about antibodies and molecular modeling. So there are intangible incentives. We also asked students if they're thinking about putting the hackathon on their resumes, and almost all of them said yes. Although there were a few that commented they hadn't thought of that till they saw the question. But it is a good thing to show on the resume. And we, believe it or not, we've had one student who has continued to lead a team from one hackathon team, like over the course of the last year. She's been organizing meetings, and this team has been meeting like once a month to talk about SARS-CoV-2 and antibodies. And she's she's also an older student, but it's pretty impressive.